Should be okay. Okay, right. Welcome to the first meeting in 2023 of Scrutiny in general, but this Scrutiny Board of Environment, Housing and Communities. Hopefully you've all had a reasonable Christmas and New Year, and looking forward to whatever 2023 brings to us all in terms of what's going to happen. So I'm Councillor Barry Anderson. I have the honour of chairing this Scrutiny Board of Environment Scrutiny Boards. This meeting is going to be webcast on the Council's website so that any interested members of the public that are unable to observe in person can still observe remotely. What I'd now like to do is to invite all the board members and the other officers to introduce themselves. So, Ash.
Hi everyone, Natasha Prosser, Clerk to the board.
Yeah, good morning everyone and Happy New Year. Javed Akhtar, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Happy New Year everyone. Councillor Jess Lennox from Crossgates and Winmore, and I'm substituting for Councillor Pauline Graham.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Councillor John Tudor, Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. And I'm Councillor Renshaw from Aston Robin Hood, substituting for Councillor Walshaw. I had to think then.
Happy New Year. Councillor Kayleigh Brooks for Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good morning everyone. Councillor Annie Maloney, Beaton Holbeck Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Asghar Khan for Bermontos and Richmond Hill Ward.
Councillor Mary Harlan, Kippets and Methley Ward, and Exec Board Member for Communities.
Hi, Kevin Mulvaney, Head of Finance, Community Housing and Environment.
Morning everybody, Paul Money, Chief Officer for the Safer Stronger Communities team.
Morning everybody and Happy New Year. James Rogers, Director of Communities, Housing and Environment.
Morning everybody, Lee Hemsworth, Chief Officer for Community Hubs Welfare and Business Support.
Good morning, Adam Crampton, Head of Property Management for Housing.
Good morning, Happy New Year everybody. Gerard Tinsdale, Chief Officer, Housing.
Good morning and Happy New Year. John Wooler, Chief Officer for Environmental Services.
Good morning, Ed Carlisle, Councillor for Hunslet and Riverside.
Good morning, Councillor Paul Wadsworth for Guys Road.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Councillor Sandy Lay, Otley and Yeadon Ward.
Good morning, everyone, and a very happy New Year to you all. Councillor Trish Smith, Pudsey Ward.
Morning all, Happy New Year. Lou Cunningham, Armley Ward.
Hi, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Thanks, Chair. Agenda item 1, there's no appeals. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt items. Agenda item 3, no formal late items. Agenda item 4, members to declare any interest. Thanks, Chair. Just in case there's any discussion around the drug and alcohol contract, just to say that I'm employed by Forward Leeds as a nurse. Thanks, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillors Graham and Councillor Walshaw. Councillor Lennox and Renshaw are here to substitute. Apologies have also been received from Councillors Cooper and Hayden.
The minutes of the 10th of November, true and accurate record. Yep, happy to approve them. In terms of minute 40 on page 5 to 10, we're still awaiting updates on a number of the outstanding information requests, but Becky's on top of that and she's trying to get them as quick as possible. And in terms of the notes on pages 11 to 16, the request to establish a working group to consider the community committees has been discussed with senior officers and will be scheduled once preparatory work has been completed by the service, so that we'll get a group of people together to take that issue forward. So we can now move officially on to item 7, the financial health monitoring. This report is one that's usually delivered to the executive board on a monthly basis, which sets out the current position in terms of whether the council is or is not going to be in deficit, surplus, or whatever, or a balanced budget by the time the financial year end is concluded. Anybody get any questions in respect of the environment, housing, or communities issues? They may have views on some of the other budget items, but Mr. Rogers is responsible for many things, but not the other budget departments in the council. So, has anybody any questions they want to ask in terms of the financial monitoring? Councillor Lay, did you? Yeah.
If I may, Chair, I just wanted to clarify. I've written it somewhere. I just need to find it. I'm really sorry. Where did I write it? Here, yes. I note that there's an overspend of 15.4 million. And I know that's across the whole council, but within this board's responsibility, what would the budget position have been without the cost of living and the inflationary pressures and the pay award? Would we have been close to neutral? Is it because of these additional costs that we're overspent?
Or James, do you want to answer it?
Yeah, I'll come in, Chair, and then Kevin may want to add. So just to be clear, if you look at page 24 of the Financial Health Monitoring Report, the majority of this board's area of responsibility comes under that line which shows us communities, housing, environment, and that's currently showing a net saving rather than an overspend. So actually, we've been able within the directorate to absorb all of the pay award pressures and the inflationary pressures that we have. So if we hadn't have had those, we would have actually been contributing a bigger saving to the council's budget.
It does state, it clearly puts out that the pay awards cost them 4.3 million and the fuel related pressures are 1.1. So, that's 5 million straight away that would have been available. And there are others as well. As you go through the breakdown we've got on page 32, you can see other areas where they've had additional pressures that weren't anticipated, but they've managed to resolve most of them, if not all of them. So anybody get any other questions, or do we accept that in this instance, communities, housing and environment are doing the tasks they were given by the council last year and working within the budget that they've been given? Yep. Okay, so we can now move on to item 8, which was the budget itself. Now, we did have a working group. Some of you were able to attend that working group. We did ask some questions. We've had feedback from the questions that were raised. The questions that were raised will form part of our overall submission. Since we last met, are there any changes to your budget, or do you want to just briefly outline the headlines in your budget for those who weren't present at the meeting? So if Kevin or James want to just briefly outline, if we could start, Kevin, can you talk about the overall budget position? Since we last spoke, the government in their infinite wisdom issued the figures on the 22nd of December, which is good when you're just about to go on holiday. So is there any significant changes in the overall budget figure as a result of that announcement? And is there anything else as a whole in terms of, have we found any extra money, or you've lost any money?
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, as you said, the government announced the provisional settlement on the 22nd of September. Sorry, December. It was slightly better overall for the council than they anticipated, but not hugely different. There was some switches between revenue support grant and specific grants, but overall nothing hugely different from the provisional budget in terms of the size of the settlement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the best way of approaching this is if you look at pages 157 and 158 of the agenda, they detail the more significant budget savings proposals that are contained within the reports that have been taken to executive board thus far, and these being particularly the ones that were in the executive board report. You'll see there are 2 pages there of a range of savings proposals, most of which are what we call business as usual savings proposals. And I can confirm, Chair, that none of these have changed since we last reported to executive board or reported to members of scrutiny through the working group.
Just now is, when does the consultation start and finish on your proposals?
There'll be specific consultations around some specific proposals there, not all of them, and where a consultation process is required, it'll be starting in the next week or 2 in order to get it completed in time for the new financial year.
That's fine, thank you. Right, questions from anyone? Anyone get any questions we'd like to ask? As I said, yeah, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the cost with the car parking charges at the parks, please, if I may. So you say that you're going to borrow 2.4 million over 30 years of prudential borrowing. So I'd like to know what the cost of that prudential borrowing is, please. It also doesn't state the timeframes when this will be implemented. So I'd like to know how much of the year we have to actually make these introduce these costs, I suppose, so that we got that revenue coming in. And the other thing is, round numbers, 2.4 mil works out about £8,000 per car park per week. So how much are the charges going to be? Because that isn't stated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the capital cost that are required in terms of the investment needs for the car parks, they're included within the financial implications table of the service review paper that I think members have been provided with. So it shows there the cost of capital in terms of that within that particular table. I think that's right. Is that, Kevin, that £154,000 per annum? In terms of when these will come online, obviously there's a large number of car parks here, and we will do them over the course of 23 into 24, and that's been estimated as part of how we the income that we project for next year and then into the year after. And that's one of the reasons why the full year effect of this proposal won't be seen until 2024, although we will see a significant income in 2023. And then in terms of the charges, what we're proposing is some fairly modest charges, recognising that most people will use these car parks for 1 or 2 hours at a time, and they will be about 40p an hour is what we're currently proposing as part of the consultation process. And we might just need some different arrangements where some of these car parks are used for maybe longer stay car parking arrangements where we're happy to encourage that. So we'll put the price in according to the appropriateness of each car park, and obviously we'll have dialogue with local ward members around some of those issues as well, but generally 40p an hour.
Can I just ask about page 158? There's a review of grants to voluntary organisations at 10%. Have we had discussions with those voluntary groups? Are they or those voluntary organisations? Are they aware that there's a proposal to cut their grants by 10%? And what's their view of that? Really, are they able to subsume that cut?
Those discussions are currently ongoing. I know in terms of specifically the groundwork Leeds one, there should be no particular challenge or issues with that. I don't know if Jez wants to comment upon the furniture stores one.
Those discussions will hopefully take place in the next week or two, so I'll be able to feedback once we've had those, Chair.
This is apologies. This is a really unspecific query that's not on a particular detail, but the consultation got a mention, and I personally have contributed to those budget consultations before. I'd be interested to know if you've got examples of where the budget has been changed based on community feedback, because lots of people in the community say, well, these consultations, there's no point because they're not really listening. I'd be interested to know if there are examples over the last years where community feedback has led to budget changes.
Yeah, we have. I think if you each year, consultation is done, I suppose, at different levels and in different ways. So there's an overall budget consultation that we do corporately, and then any response that we get back and the impact of that consultation on any changes will be reported through the budgetary process. And then in terms of specifics, I know John Woolmer there's got a specific example that he can refer to now.
Thanks, James. Yeah, in a couple of years ago, we had the budget proposals included the closure of Ella Gill part-time initially, moved to full-time, and as part of the consultation that was done more locally as well in terms of listening to member and resident feedback, we've not enforced that change at all. It's under review as part of the household waste sites sort of strategy across the city, but it's something we have no plans at the moment to put in place, and that was hugely due to a lot of the feedback that we got from residents and customers that was fed back to us through that specific consultation process.
Thank you. Just a question of, I might have missed it in the 300 pages, enforcement of car parking in all of these potential and new sites. Just any comments on that?
Yeah, that's been incorporated into the business plan in terms of taking it forward. We're not expecting to see significant additional enforcement income other than what it costs to actually do the enforcement activity, but that's all built into the proposal.
Wadsworth?
Apologies if I've missed this as well in the 300 pages, but how much of the borrowing is going to be used for improving the surface and the car parks, and how much is going to be used for measures to stop people evading the charge?
Okay, I don't have that detail to hand, but I'm happy to get back to members with that later.
With the car parks, two things. One is, are the improvements going to be made first before the car parking charges are introduced or not? And for those people who are regular users, so for example, in my ward, Golden Acre Park is used by a lot of people to go and walk their dogs every day. You know, they go along every single day. So is there going to be season ticket, call it whatever you like, that you can pay a one-off cost, which if you did that would actually probably improve the cash flow of the council because you'd get the money up front? Have you thought about those as alternatives or not?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we will include season ticket options where we consider those to be an appropriate and useful addition, which I think will be in most of the car parks. I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer in terms of the specific maintenance requirements, because I think we need to do an individual assessment of each car park and then take a view, because some might be more cosmetic changes that need to be made where we can maybe delay that a little bit later on, but implement the charges sooner. But I think where we need major works, we do the major works first before implementing the charges.
would that, if you're in accepting that, what you just said, would that mean that maybe the amount of money you can raise in 2023-24 might be affected if, when you've done that analysis, some of the ones that might produce the larger returns also need the work done on them as well?
Clearly, because it's important that we project accurately, because you will measure me in 12 months' time against where I am with next year's budget. I've asked officers to make sure that we are as close as we possibly can to what we think the real income will be next year, taking account of all of those issues.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Smith?
Sorry, Chair, I forgot to ask. Is there anywhere where it states how many spaces are available at each of these parks, please? I'd like to know the overall number of spaces available. Thank you.
Again, it's not information I've got to hand, but we can get that provided.
Sorry, I forgot to ask about, in the year of Leeds 2023, it just feels mean-spirited to see bonfires and firework displays. Can we not raise the money some other way? It just seems like we're sucking the life, the joy out of the city, particularly for those communities that get the firework displays, because I recognise they're not all over the city. It's just a sort of thinking aloud, really. It just seems a bit mean-spirited in this particular year of Leeds 2023, when we're supposed to be promoting arts and entertainment.
You want to?
Yeah, I think it's probably a comment rather than a question. I mean, this is a budget proposal that will be going through the budgetary process, and we'll see what the outcome is.
Just on that again, this is a comment, I suppose, more than a question. But to mitigate against that, could we as a council have some funding, much less than we would have spent if we were running civic events, available for community associations to bid for, to put on their own fireworks and bonfire events, just to send out the message that we're not trying to quash this, but just have a community-led efforts instead of council-led.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I was a tad bit late. Just following on from Councillor Lay's point as well about it being mean-spirited. Councillor Lay, I was somebody who was born and raised in Hare Hills. I very much went along to Roundhay Park with my family. It was not an easy decision to make to get rid of the bonfire night, because I know what it means to the local community. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we have to make this decision because of the budget pressures that are out there. Unfortunately, it's the government that's being mean-spirited in funding the council. That's where I think the blame lies. Having said that, I think Councillor Carlisle's point is right in terms of actually what can we do to encourage local community events happening. We didn't take all of the money away. We actually put in money in certain areas of the community to do extra activities, and actually from what I heard this year from the police, actually it was a lot calmer in terms of what was happening. I think now that we've got a little bit of a heads up, because we had to make the decision so last minute because we were waiting to see if the funding position got better, there's more work we can do with local communities and hopefully working with local members as well in terms of making sure we do have that activity going on and make sure everybody does enjoy. And it isn't mean-spirited, Councillor Lay, and hopefully we can make something of it. Thank you.
We cancelled fireworks display this year when James has already told us we're underspent. You know.
That the business as usual ones were brought forward. Last year, the business as usual changes weren't brought forward. And I think that's something that the council have learned, and they've been more open about it, which has been to their advantage as well. I mean, okay, it has led to conversations going on as to what the changes are, but I think that was something that was done really well this year. So on that basis, what we will now do is that we will take a note of what everybody said. Becky will develop our response, taking into consideration what's been said today and also the questions and the answers that we got from our working group as well. That will then be submitted, and the Scrutiny Board resources, I think, get them all together and they make a final view known. And as far as I'm aware, our comments will form part of the budget papers so that all councillors can see what was discussed and what was said at each scrutiny board, which will hopefully reflect back in the spirit of openness. As far as I know, that's one of the undertakings that the administration have given. So thank you very much on that one. So if you are only been here for the funding finance, you can leave, or if you want, if you're so excited, you can remain behind. So can I invite our performance management colleagues to come forward, please? Oh. Right. Okay, right. If you would both like to introduce yourself, and then we'll get Councillor Arif and Councillor Rafiq to formally introduce themselves as well, because everybody else did it. So if you want to start and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Happy New Year, everybody. Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service, and we look after corporate performance management.
Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. My name's Ian Strickland. I work in the Communities Housing and Environments Business Development team, and I work specifically on Directorate Performance.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm Councillor Salma Arif. I'm the Executive Member for Public Health and Active Lifestyle.
And Councillor Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mohammed Rafiq is our board member for Environment and Housing, and likewise, hopefully you have a great 2023. Okay.
Just briefly introduce, because these are the first set of figures on the revised layout, etc. So do you want to just explain the logic behind where the different criteria came from, and what the process is from moving forward from here?
Yeah, thank you. The report's actually split two ways this month. It's you could argue it's a little bit of a transitional report with the advent of the Best City Ambition, and the first appendix is really a baseline position across a number of measures. I think we've covered in the report there that it covers everything, hence the number of pages, but the intention over time is that there will be a much more purpose analytical overview provided for this scrutiny board in future months. So it's there as a point of reference now. It's there as a starting position. There's a number of areas which are relevant to this particular board, and hopefully it's something which we'll be able to report on a more streamlined basis moving forward as the Best City Ambition matures over time. The second part of the report, which is the more detail in Appendix 2, is around the selected performance measures after the review of the Q1 update in June. So we've brought that information down. It's still broke down service by service. Hopefully over time we'll be able to reflect these areas against the Best City Ambition pillars and provide an overview and statistics where available for each area. There is the exception of the crime and incident-based information, which is West Yorkshire Police owned data, so we wouldn't be able to report that in the public domain, but I'm sure that will be available on request if required. So a contextual update has been provided by colleagues in Safer Stronger Communities around each of those areas at the latter part of Appendix 2. So that's basically an overview of the report this quarter. So if anybody's got any questions, please ask.
Before opening it up, Paul, can you clarify, how can we as councillors get access to crime information? Because as was commented in the pre-meeting, some of the NPT inspectors do release the information to the local councillors. Other NPT inspectors don't. There's no sort of consensus across the board. And I also made the comment when we had the West Yorkshire Combined Authority people before the resources one, that I personally felt that the scrutiny of the police wasn't very effective by using the police and crime panel, so that we know whether crimes are going up or down. What is the position, and what can we as councillors get, and what can't we get?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My recommendation to members and to councillors generally would be to secure the relevant data sets that you're looking for, principally from your neighbourhood policing teams. I do understand that there has been some inconsistencies, as you rightly say, Chair, about access to that information, but that would be the principal source, because that information is collated by the Leeds District Police District Intelligence Unit. So that's where that information is accessible. If any members are having difficulties in terms of securing that information, then I'm more than happy to support any request. One of the things that does happen quite a bit is that different data sets are being asked for by different councillors, which sometimes creates an issue. But in general terms, the neighbourhood policing teams should be providing that information on a regular basis to members. And as I say, if there's an issue, more than happy to assist.
Open to questions. Anybody get any questions on, well, let's take the first part, which was Appendix 1, which was the graphs, which basically look at the council's best city ambitions. Anybody get any questions, queries or observations about either the way it's been set out or any of that information that they want further clarity on? Or are you happy that that does set out what was intended by the council? Everybody happy that that's laid out in a usable format that members of the public can understand, we can understand, and we can compare good, bad, and indifferent, whatever the performance levels are? Yep, happy with that. Right, so if we then move over to Appendix 2, so if we can go through anything. Now, I'm going to refer to two numbers. One is the page number in terms of Appendix 2, but also the page number on the paper copies of the agenda. The reason I say the paper copies, because if you're accessing this online, the page numbers aren't the same. Don't ask me why, but they're not the same. So if we can go to page 2 of Appendix 2 or page 254, depending on which way you watch. Anybody get any questions on that page at all? If not, we will then move on to page 255. Anybody get any queries or questions on the information? Now, okay, page 256. Page 257. Page 258. Page 259. Page 260. 261. 262. 263. 264 is blank. 265. 266. 267. 268. 269. 270. 271. 272. 273. So you get A+ for satisfaction anyway. Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, can I just jump back to page 257? And just raising some points that I raised in the previous scrutiny. I think with those, the figures about homelessness, I'd still like to see a bit more clarification between street homelessness and people who are without a home, and it maybe in temporary accommodations. I'd just like to see it broken down a little bit further, and also maybe a bit more information on the kind of engagement side of things as well. Thank you.
The figures may not be 100% accurate, but I'm fairly sure of this week we've got 93 cases of people in emergency accommodation. In terms of rough sleep numbers, I can't quite remember the figure. I'm just looking over at Paul. I think the last count was just under 30. But we can certainly get that broken down into a bit more detail and share that.
I'm from a collective data. The future, do you think have you got a data source that you can probably get it?
Councillor Anderson, I'll speak to Jez's team, Peter Shovlin and co, and raise the questions and look at the reports in future reflecting the information requested by the councillor.
That's fine. Right, I've got Councillor Smith and then Councillor Carlisle.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from that point, could we bring back at some point about the ghost tenancies that we discussed previously and see if we can free up some homes for these people? The other thing that I was going to raise, so I'm jumping back to page 256 in my papers, the claims for disrepair. How accurate or up to date, sorry, rather than accurate, are the figures? And can we have these brought back, I'm going to say quarterly, if that's at all possible, because given the recent updates regarding the mold and damp, I'd like to make sure that we remain on top of that and that our residents are being cared for in the way that we would like them to be. Thank you.
I'll say in public what I did say in private yesterday. I thought the way that housing have tried to get ahead of the curve on the mould by issuing information to councillors, and I did thank privately Councillor Rafiq yesterday, but I'm saying it public now that I think it was good, the proactive way that that's been dealt with, and councillors now have information that they can utilise. And if you've not seen it, there's also an update today with a different email address in it as well, which has been updated. So does someone want to answer Councillor Smith's point? Jez, yeah.
I'll come in first and then I'll hand over to Adam. Thanks for the positive comments, though, councillors, around the work we're doing on damp and mould. That's very much appreciated. In terms of the ghost tenancies, I think the challenge in the reporting on how many we've got across the city is actually understanding whether or not there's somebody living in those properties. But what I can do is certainly share data on those where we know we've got concerns over those tenancies and what action we're taking to secure bringing those homes back or ensuring that the people move back into those properties. So we'll certainly do that. And I'll hand over Adam just to pick up the disrepair, if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, response to your question directly, Councillor Smith. Yeah, we're confident in the accuracy of those figures. We report that data live on a weekly basis, and more than happy to provide that on a quarterly basis.
Yes, so thanks. So just off the back of Councillor Cunningham's question again, so you mentioned street homeless and you mentioned people in emergency accommodation. I suppose what's our knowledge and what's our approach to the hundreds, possibly thousands of people who are perhaps hidden homeless, sofa surfers? Like I think you mentioned 93 in emergency accommodation, but I think I know 93 people plus alone who I'm sure my colleagues do as well, who are hidden homeless, sofa surfing, etc.
In terms of those in an urgent housing need, we've got just short of 6,000 on our register at the moment that we actively engage with. We have systems in place to make sure that we contact them on a regular basis to make sure they're bidding and trying to secure accommodation. We also try and advertise the service that Leeds Housing Options provides, so that if people think they are at risk of homelessness, that they contact us early. The earlier somebody contacts us, the more likely it is we can support them and help prevent homelessness. And just to give you an idea of how that approach is working, compared to statistics nationally, in Leeds, we prevent homelessness for about 80% of those that approach us. The national statistic, I think, is something like 55%. So Leeds is in a strong position in terms of supporting people in that way.
Mr. Woolman and Councillor Freak wouldn't appreciate if I didn't let them off the hook with the refuse side of things. And as we're jumping back, Chair, it's 268 and 269. The performance on missed bins looks really good on this paper, but it's not always what we see on a daily basis. And I think there is a lot of averaging out being done here by doing it as a 4-week period. And it is the most annoying thing you get for your council taxes when you come home and your bin hasn't been emptied. So are we looking to achieve more on that front? And more importantly, on household waste recycling, our target hasn't really been achieved at all, has it? And is our target ambitiously enough when we're in a climate emergency?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the missed bins are concerned, I've always said I've never hidden from the fact that I think we're always going to miss bins for the various reasons. You know, vehicle obstruction, there's more cars parked on our streets than ever before because more and more people are working from home. In the past, when people actually left their homes, went to the offices, you had, you know, somewhat sort of easy to navigate through some difficult, narrow streets. And there are obviously other vehicle breakdowns, roadworks, sometimes because we have a shortage of, you know, crews, illnesses, and there's a new crew as well. And there are some difficult, you know, it may be assisted collection, it may be a difficult cul-de-sac where, and then there's also, you know, it varies from one driver to another who somebody could actually have the confidence to kind of just try every way in the book to kind of reverse into a narrow street, others probably not. So, you know, there are a whole host of factors, you know, given, you know, I always say this, that I think one bin missed, if you're the customer at the end of the day whose bin is missed, well, that's not what you want to see. Nobody will be pleased. Okay. On the flip side, I think if there was a service, any service, whether it's a public or private, where we actually achieve over 99% that is exemplary. But I think when you're actually collecting every bin in the city on a weekly basis, then, you know, inevitably there's going to be missed. I think what's important is when they are missed and we get it right. And usually, you know, 99% of the time we do go back and collect them. There are some occasional, you know, if it's not recorded or on the end of day report, and then it can only be noticed or if you report it or a customer reports it to us. So there we are with it. I mean, I think overall, I think we've had a good 2022, unlike 2021 when we had some difficult weeks or months during August and September. I think 2022 has gone reasonably well. Even the Christmas period with the different collections on different days, I think it's gone reasonably well because, you know, it's not easy to kind of communicate that information. And I think thanks to everybody, all the elected members and everybody for sharing that information and people kind of having to put their bin out a day earlier, which usually is a day later for a few days. I'll just stop there. I don't know if you want to add, John. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Fake. Yeah, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Wadsworth. Just a couple of points to add to that for myself. I think in terms of the information that's provided to Scrutiny, obviously that's a quite high level, but it does go down to a 4-weekly analysis as well, and therefore it's always going to have some degree of lack of detail in that. So I recognise that, and that's one of the reasons we every single day at the end of day before we finish for the day provide an end of day report for all councillors across the city where they've experienced. We're aware of the experienced misspins that day. And we've, as you know, as Scrutiny, because it's an issue that's been raised by yourselves, and one of the actions that we've had over the last 2 or 3 years to deal with from yourselves is to improve that end of day report. And I do think that end of day report is more reliable and provides more detailed information than it ever has done. I've always been clear at Scrutiny in conversations with members individually that we can always improve that in terms of that reliability, and that's something we continue to focus on, and through appraisals with staff and in terms of improving the technology to explain why reporting a missed bin is a good thing, and so we will continue to improve that. But I do think, and I hope you recognise that we have improved that over the last 2 or 3 years, and that's fundamentally where the local accountability with yourselves lies, and also in part of the work we're trying to do to redesign the routes and look at how they are more coterminous with community committee boundaries. We're looking at that so we can then look at more localised performance information that we can provide to yourselves in the future around performance, whether that be missed bins, but also crucially in terms of the tonnage of waste that we've collected in your community committee areas and how much of that tonnage has gone to recycling, for example. So that is something that's a key objective within the route review, to look at the designing of the routes around that. So we do recognise the fact that the more we can be more accountable to yourselves, the better, and the better it drives our performance up, and the more accountable we are ultimately to our customers. So that deals with that in that answer in a way. The recycling, yes, I think when you go back and look at the information that's provided, you can see that Leeds is probably in the middle of the core cities in terms of performance. Leeds has, I would argue, quite unique challenges even within the core cities in terms of the size, the geography, the demography, the amount of housing that's particularly high density and transient population. So we do have challenges around that. The point I'd make, and always try and make when we discuss recycling, because I think it's really important the public understand this, is that the government's recycling statistics don't take account of the waste that we take to recycle energy and recovery facilities. So it's really important to make that point that only about 0.5% of the waste that we collect across Leeds ends up in landfill. So 99.5% of the waste doesn't. So although the recycling overall statistics that we report on are lower than we'd all want, I'd really like to make that point that doesn't mean the rest of it therefore is going to landfill and not being used to create energy, whether that be electricity or heating. And ultimately the byproduct, the ash that's produced from that, is also used in road aggregates, for example. So even that doesn't go to landfill. That said, we're really keen to improve recycling, and we're working, as you know, and I've updated Scrutiny previously around the future waste strategy, and certainly the noises from DEFRA just prior to Christmas were encouraging in terms of making some more announcements and giving some more detail to councils around particularly extended producer responsibility, which is packaging, for example, requirements, and being clear to councils how that will be funded and how they'd expect us to deliver those. And that we're really keen on that, and we're working very closely with DEFRA as a result of those conversations and developing a good working relationship with them around that. So we're really hopeful in the next year or so that we'll see a lot of progress in that, in terms of bringing forward a waste strategy that shows how we'll improve some of the offers to residents across Leeds in terms of being able to present different waste streams for recycling.
I just wanted to give a really quick anecdotal sort of follow up on what you mentioned about how reporting missed bins is a good thing, and residents, as soon as they do report missed bins, we can take action for that. We've had a few problem areas in our ward where bins have been repeatedly missed because of access issues, and the team have been really responsive in sending the crew back. Obviously, for recovery within the 48 hours is one thing, but they've responded by sending them at a different time or communicating that maybe it's been put down to review next time the route is reviewed, about that time and that day for collection in the area because of parked cars and stuff like that. I don't remember a time when we've not been able to get something cleared up within a couple of days in the ward. And so I do think that the responsiveness has improved, the communication has improved. I think it used to maybe be a week before you got a response, but we are getting a response within a day or two from the teams now when we use the members' email address. So I just wanted to anecdotally put that in to say that over the course of the year, I think there's definitely has been progress in how responsive people can be to where there are issues inside the service. So thank you.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Right. I've got Councillor Smith and Councillor Leigh.
Thanks, Chair. Mine was more of a comment, really. In terms of reporting, if we know that the RRF does an absolutely amazing job, and that we do incinerate a lot and create a lot of heating and hot water for our residents. So is it worth putting a line in the reporting that clearly defines that shows just how positive that can be? I don't know whether it's possible, but I think that would set us apart and would really sort of be more of a positive slant towards what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yeah, absolutely. I think the end of day report, which I think you're mainly referring to, is mainly a tool for us to send at the end of the day for yourselves to be aware of the missed bins and be able to then relay that to, if you wish, to through your local networks to residents, but also for professionally for us to be able to plan for the next day. So it's kind of really that. It's not at the moment. It's not a public email we send out. But and we do in terms of the positive side of it. That's one of the reasons that we did at the start of the end of day report talk about the number of bins that day that we were due to collect to get the sort of perspective there in terms of the missed bins.
Sorry, I wasn't really referring to the missed bin report as such. I was just kind of, when you report back to scrutiny, that kind of thing. I know that the missed bin report is definitely what we get daily and is a different thing altogether. Sorry for the confusion.
Sorry, my fault. Yeah, I mean that'd be something I'd be quite happy to discuss with colleagues around how we include something else in the performance report that talks about where the rest of the waste goes. Absolutely.
Generally, that's one of the reasons that we've got this report here, is to try and smooth out and make any further suggestions, because I do know that Ian is open to suggestions as to what information we need, because they will provide the information. If they can get it, if they can get the data, then they will provide it for the use of members to do, and they want to do it. They want to do it. So I think that's something from there. So, right, Councillor Leigh.
Thank you, Chair. This might sound frivolous, and I don't mean it to be, although it's reasonably light-hearted. It would be amiss of me not to ask a question that my wife asked over Christmas, John, really. She likes to leave a gift for the postman, the milkman, and she calls them dustmen. All right. She asked me if there was consistency in the bin men who turned up each week, and were the same binmen was the same team collecting the black and the green. For the benefit of my wife and the hundreds watching on telly on the screen up there, can you sort of reassure her that there is some consistency and that the chocolates and money went to the right team and all of that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the majority of routes, which are alternate week collections, so green, black, they will be done by the same crew. But bear in mind they work shifts, so it could alternate in terms of it's the same 5 or 6 people, but it might be the different 3 on one week and the different 3 on depending on the shift falls. But the same team of staff, to collect both the black and the green bins. But of course, I couldn't absolutely guarantee they got the chocolates, because it might be they were off sick or on leave or whatever that day, and some lucky scratch crew got the. But I think it's fair to say the crews are very keen to be on their route around Christmas time.
I can add to that my army crew got their chocolates hand delivered to them.
Mr. Warmer, really, I think you mentioned technology to take this brilliant bin service to even more perfection. As we know, people are particularly interested in this area. Vehicle obstruction is a big thing, like by far the biggest thing. And I wondered if you could tell us briefly a little more about the technology ideas that are being introduced to explore working on that.
Thank you, Councillor Tudor. Yeah, a couple of things that we're on with at the moment in terms of improving our technology. Both involve technology on the cabs themselves, the wagons themselves. So we've already been introduced an in-cab technology a few years ago, and as members of the Scrutiny Committee aware, it's not always gone completely smoothly, and we've had quite a lot of effort in terms of trying to get them used by all the crews, and I think that's working a lot better now than it did before, and that's one of the reasons the end of day report is a lot better than it used to be. But we're in a replacement program at the moment for all those units to allow the new unit allows them to take it out, so it's not just screwed in and in permanently in the cab, and it has a photograph facility on it. So we're working with those to get those in, and then be working with charge hands to say, well, you can actually now take this out and take a photograph of an offending vehicle, perhaps. But also, we're also updating at the moment, in the process of updating the CCTV cameras on all of the wagons so that they have 5G capabilities as well. So we could, in theory, well, not in theory, we can go live to a crew in terms of viewing the CCTV. So the technology improvements are being made. We then need to move on to then making sure we make the best use of those. But those two technological improvements will give us a much better opportunity to then deal with very specific local issues in terms of like I say, for example, access problems.
Okay. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to move on to antisocial behaviour, and on page 270, I know a lot of areas in Leeds have experienced the motorcycle, quad bikes related to antisocial behaviours, especially in the East End Park where Berbatov, Richmond Hill, we experience quite heavily in the residents. And then the inspector from Inner East, West Yorkshire Police, had the diesel crest operation, and working with partnership with our Leeds City Council, we managed to reduce quite a large number of antisocial behaviour in the area. And on the report, it says we have engaged with 15 young people. Do we know which wards they're from, those young people? And also, there are some trainings and learning different skills, i.e. mechanic skills. Can we roll out to other areas where we've seen some increased antisocial behaviour? And I just want to thank the Inner East Police and also the Leeds City Council partnership work. It's been really successful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Khan. I think the issue of the antisocial use of motor vehicles, motorcycles in particular, but isn't necessarily just limited to motorcycles, is a significant issue that's been experienced in a number of communities. And certainly East Leeds, some of the communities in East Leeds, as Councillor Khan has said, have experienced some significant issues. There have also been issues in South Leeds as well, that some members may be aware of. Less so in the West, but it's a significant enough issue for us to have really focused in a partnership sense on this particular issue, because it does need that overall partnership response to address it. In terms of the ewes that were engaged, I think those ewes were engaged as part of Diesel Crest, which was a specific operation, but it's by no means the only operation that's been put into place. And I think there are references in the papers around further developments, including the development of a public space protection order for the whole of the city in terms of addressing this particular issue. So our approach is being developed and enhanced over time. We do prefer to take that preventative approach, and where we can offer, often working with third sector organisations who've got good connections with communities and young people, where we can offer alternative provision for young people, the likes of which Councillor Khan's referenced there, then that's proved to be effective in terms of the response. I guess the enforcement type approach, which we need to do, we will do, and we will continue to do it. But our preference really is to seek to stop this at source, and some of that is to do with the time that young people have on their hands, as we all know, not dissimilar from other forms of antisocial behaviour. But there'll be continued work on this particular agenda moving forwards, not least that the work on the PSPO, and our partnership with West Yorkshire Police on this issue is very strong and will continue to be so.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that, could you tell me what guidance there is available for the electric scooters that a lot of young people now seem to have had bought for Christmas that have been quite a nuisance and a danger on our roads?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Councillor Renshaw, in terms of the again the technological developments and the use of electrically powered carriages of one form or another. Probably the best thing I can do in terms of responding to this, it's quite a complicated issue with guidance that changes, and some areas operating in pilot sites and other areas not. Perhaps the best thing I could do, Chair, with this particular request is maybe provide some information by way of email, and then pick up any queries after that.
Wasting. I chair as part of the SEAC, the biodiversity group, and we've recently been discussing the circular economy and the need to reduce and reuse rather than necessarily recycle. We want to try and get it caught further upstream, downstream, depending on which way you take it. How could we start collecting information like that can then be put on this report to show how much we've stopped at that stage? How can we measure it? How can we, so that we can effectively communicate out to people? Does anybody got any ideas on that? I mean, people say, well, what ideas are there? Well, some people in the council some councillors have been working with school uniforms, recycling of school uniforms, which is a good, positive thing, to measure what's the effect of that. Recently, I know that John recently signed off a contract with Seagulls again in order to try and for the paint side of things. How can we record some of that information so that it can then make its way onto this report? John, have you any thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely correct. It's a really important point of the hierarchy in terms of how we deal with waste, and something that is in risk sometimes of getting missed in the discussion. I think in terms of how we could provide more information here, there's probably two sides to that. There's one what we have more direct influence over in terms of contractually, whether that's through Seagulls, recycling paint, reusing paint, or whether it's through Revive in the two Revive shops at Kirkstall and Seacroft, reselling items. So they're things that we can easily provide tonnage information, convert that to carbon benefits, etc., and certainly report on that. Then there's the more indirect sort of work that we help and support and facilitate and encourage. So we have, for example, worked with some members around the school uniform scheme in terms of providing green bins for the schools or for local groups to use, for example. That's not something that's our project. It's not something we'd even want to claim as our project, but we help support, but we don't really have information that we could provide to the scrutiny on that. And then other organisations that promote reuse, such as Zero Waste Leeds, for example, we work very closely with and support where we can. But again, we don't hold data on that we could share with you. So I think what I'm saying is we could provide some narrative around, and that's what we were expecting within the waste strategy to be able to describe as well, in terms of how, as a council and particularly as service, we will support reuse. But in terms of statistical information here for you to measure, to be measured and performance managed against, the only real things I could provide are the stuff that we directly have some contractual relationships. I'm very happy to provide, but my concern would be that that's a little bit of the tip of the iceberg of actually what happens across the city. I know for yourself, Councillor, you do a lot of work around the bikes, for example, and stuff like that. And organisations such as yours and voluntary sector organisations will do so much more than what we do. So I don't know, maybe I'll go away and think about it and have a chat with you about how we best reflect that here.
Ian, is there on the Leeds data mill, do any of these third sector organisations report any information into, you know, for example, Zero Waste Leeds? Do they put any data into the Leeds data mill that you can mine or not?
I can't answer that question at the moment, Councillor Anderson, but I can check. Obviously, like John says, we can speak to the relative contacts from each of these areas to see what information is available.
That certainly based on the presentation that I got and the other members of the SEAC that were at it, is that the circular economy is the one thing I think as a council we are going to be looking at even more over the coming year, 18 months, as to how we can operate it more effectively within the council and how we can get residents of the city to buy into the concept of it, that it's not wrong to use somebody who's finished with something, reusing it again. I think it's a concept. Councillor Smith?
The My Puddy team set up a toy swap in Puddy just before Christmas, and it was hugely well received. We were receiving toys and gifts in that hadn't even been opened because the child had a duplicate or whatever. I mean, and that would have gone probably into landfill somewhere. So, something like that, as simple as it sounds, was really well received.
I keep forgetting to press my button. Oh, it was great in the past because I could keep that button on all the time, but the new process makes me lose. But, and also I think what this report shows is where the council are doing really well and areas where I think we would all concede that there is further work needing to be done, which I think was what the purpose of the performance indicators were. It wasn't just to say, oh, aren't we brilliant? It was to highlight areas of where work needs to be done. And I would say that as long as the council have got plans to address those, then, fine. We can have the political knockabout, but I think it's important that as long as you've got plans to try and address some of these things, because you no sooner solve one problem and another one comes along as a consequence of it. And I mean, the example that I brought up just now, in the recycling rates, if we actually start reusing and reducing, then you would expect recycling not necessarily to improve because you're stopping it getting to that particular stage. And it's how you then decide. And also how we start incorporating in the recycling side, the carbon input or the carbon effect of the recyclates that we're doing, because I know that that's one thing that John and his team are working on just now, is to try and come up with a workable model as to how we can start reporting how much carbon we're actually saving, because not necessarily the volume is the important thing, it's recycling the things with the biggest carbon effect will have a better effect on Leeds as a whole in terms of meeting our figures. So, Councillor Carlisle.
Thank you, Councillor. I was hesitating before asking this question, but something you said spurred me to ask it, so I will. So if it's all right, I'm just going to go back about 10 minutes in the conversation before we close this. Just you're talking then about celebrating what we've done and looking at what we need to be done. Just on the antisocial behaviour report that we were speaking about 5-10 minutes ago, there's lots in there that celebrates some of the good stuff that has been happening. I'm not seeing lots in there about kind of, I suppose, critiquing ourselves or wondering what needs to be done still. As we all know, there's lots of frustrations remain in our communities around really major issues, and in some cases escalation issues around antisocial behaviour. So I'd be interested to hear you talk a bit more about the work that you think we still needs to be done looking forward.
Paul, do you want to just briefly?
Only to say, really, in terms of this report and the work with this board, the key priority issues are what we're looking to highlight. I do recognise that there are issues around social behaviour, and there always will be, to be perfectly honest. I think the thing with that, in terms of the local arrangements, is how responsive are we as a partnership to addressing them. So I'd be more than happy to pick up any specific conversations around any key issues with any local members, to be perfectly honest, especially where the perception, or even indeed the reality, is that the response to that issue could be more comprehensive. I think the problem with something like antisocial behaviour is it's almost a conceptual thing. There's so much that falls under the banner of antisocial behaviour that putting something meaningfully into a report of this nature, other than those big themes that we're trying to identify, may prove to be problematic. But I'm more than happy to pick up a conversation about any specific issues on that matter to assist moving forwards.
I'm just looking. Next time we're meant to be taking information on the scrutiny board and antisocial behaviour, it'll be the successor board will need to decide on that one. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, right. So in that case, thank you very much for your attendance on the performance measurement side. If we can now move on to item 10, the work schedule. Becky?
It's really just to ask members to note that there's an additional remote consultative meeting on the 20th of January to discuss reducing gambling harm. The invitations did go out before Christmas, but I'm aware they may have got lost in the email. So it's just to draw your attention to that.
Okay. And so the date and time of the next public meeting is Thursday, the 2nd of February at 10:30 with a pre-meeting at 10. And so I look forward to seeing you all remotely on Friday the 20th. Thank you for your attendance today, and hopefully you found it an enjoyable and informative session. Thank you very much.